Thanks a lot for everyone's time. I know everyone has a busy schedule, Emily especially flying all the way out. But I thought we could just jump right into it and kind of start things off with sort of a two-part question where first and foremost, if you guys can just quickly introduce yourselves. I mean, some of you are very familiar to the people around here in the audience, but for others, maybe they're coming in from a different perspective. And also, first and foremost, what gets you excited about this sort of intersectional space of digital art and NFTs? Maybe we can start with you, Emily.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Emily. I'm a digital artist. I go by the artist name pplpleasr. And probably around like last summer, I was creating a lot of like digital art, specifically more like and getting involved in the crypto space. And then so, I did that for a bit. And then basically this year when like NFTs had their explosion, in March, I sold an NFT for a lot of money. And I guess like that's my sort of like magnum opus, or why like people know who I am now, or at least within the crypto space. But I mean, I'm excited because like basically NFTs have given digital artists like an opportunity to monetize their work in a way that wasn't really previously possible, especially with 3D artists. Usually, our goal or career path is just to make art, maybe post it on Instagram, hope to get some engagement and likes, and then attract clients, which then we are doing work for and executing their visions, and never really sort of selling our own work in a way that traditional artists can. So yeah, I think and there's so many more other points about why I think this technology is really cool, but that's probably the main and low-hanging fruit one.
Cool. Yeah, maybe we can jump over to James.
Yeah, I'm James Jean. I'm an artist here in Los Angeles. I've been a painter, illustrator, designer, sculptor for the past, 20 years or so. I'm most known for creating traditional art, but I've always used digital media, Photoshop, and now I use a lot of 3D tools to create my physical sculptures. So using digital workflow has always been a part of my work. Using drawing and using technology to transform it into something that's greater than something on paper, and turning it into something physical.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Emily said previously, where she said, she was very clear in putting a wrap around it as a sort of digital artist. And obviously your start was primarily in the physical space. Do you see this new chapter sort of developing before your eyes? Because as Emily mentioned, there's now a way for you to, I guess, create a new market and attract a new audience for your work.
Yeah, I mean, I created a whole body of digital work that really had no place to go. There's no way to monetize the work other than to make prints. And then when the whole NFT craze started happening, I saw a way forward in terms of creating one-of-ones for these digital works and kind of elevating them to the same level as my physical pieces. So that idea was very interesting to me, and I wanted to explore that and also engage with a new body of collectors. And it was a rocky start, but extremely fascinating to engage in. I think went really well in the beginning, and then there was a little bit of controversy once I released it, and I think we're still dealing with the fallout from that, because NFTs still remain pretty controversial among, I think, my fan base to this day.
Cool. We can move on to Jeff and his insights.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Jeff. As Julia mentioned, I have a couple of businesses. I started a clothing line in 1997 called Staple. It was one of the first sort of original like streetwear brands. Since then, I've been involved in some pretty important sneaker projects that sort of took sneaker culture from a very niche subculture to what it is today, which is like a very mainstream multi-billion-dollar industry with a multi-billion-dollar secondary industry that has spawned off of it from resale and aftermarket sales. And I also have a creative agency called the Read Art Department. I have a podcast on Hypebeast called The Business of Hype, where James has been a guest of mine on the show. And I only recently started getting into NFTs as well. And for me, I think to Emily's point, I think she touched on this, is this idea of ownership is really key. One of the cool things is like, one of the shoes that I did is it's a shoe that I did with Nike that has like historically very high resale value. So a pair goes for like $50,000 to $60,000. But recently, literally just 2 weeks ago on Sotheby's, it auctioned off for $90,000, which is the highest strike price for any dunk that wasn't worn on field by a celebrity or something like that. And I actually think that was, we can get into this later, but I think that was spawned because of the hype of the NFT that's been happening. But it didn't matter to me because I didn't see one penny from that transaction. Like, the person who collected it made a lot of money. Sotheby's made a lot of money. The new collector got this piece, but like I got nothing out of it other than just goodwill and PR. So this idea that like I create work, but then all these other people benefit from it is sort of like the old way. And NFTs are really interesting because we're like the equivalent of a musician kind of like owning our masters. There was sort of never an equivalent of that for an artist before. And also the other thing that I love about it is, I grew up in the age of graffiti, where it was sort of like a graffiti artist's mission to sort of put their mark on everything possible. It used to be like trains and billboards and walls, and then it became clothing, t-shirts, sneakers, bicycles, automobiles, energy drinks, wherever the sort of industry like kind of went to. And now there's like this whole new universe, literally, where I can like start tagging my brand all over it. So it always sort of like is intriguing to the graffiti artist mentality in my brand.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jeff. One thing that might be helpful to people in the audience is, I think referential elements are to what already exists and what's out there is helpful to kind of explain. It's not always a one-to-one comparison, but I mean, building off of what you said, Jeff, what sort of crossovers or shared perspectives do you see between the world of streetwear and NFTs? Like what things were immediately identifiable between the digital art NFT space and streetwear?
It was the community, like you said. It was the fact that there was a subset of people that were really into one thing, and the mainstream didn't understand what they were doing, and in fact hated on what they were doing, as James alluded to. And that was very much the case in early streetwear, early skateboarding, early hip hop. I remember even when I was in college, people were having debates about like, when will hip hop die? Like, when will skateboarding be over? It's just like the funniest, most ludicrous talk when you think about where that culture's come to now. And then they were saying, when will, streetwear brands die? And when will sneaker culture die? And now it's like that same community is sort of saying like, when will NFTs and crypto sort of, when will the bubble burst on that? So there's always that like underdog chip on your shoulder mentality that I feel like is common. And the other thing with the community is that, as you mentioned, there's like, because we're quote unquote underground, we have to find underground places to speak at, and also in a different language. I mean, the original of this was hip hop and Ebonics, but then now it's like, if you stumble upon a Discord forum or like, a Twitter rant about, crypto or NFTs, you literally have to have a glossary because you won't understand the words that they're saying. So that code switches is common too. That's the main thing for me. Actually, there is a big difference in the commodification and also the economics of it. Because I've been dabbling more and more now in NFTs, and what I find that's really different is that in streetwear and sneaker culture, the scarcity was usually occurring because of a lack of means from people. Like, I started Staple with a 12 t-shirt print order, And it wasn't because I was trying to be like cool and limited edition with 12. It's because I could only afford to make 12 t-shirts. That's why. And so that was the limitation. And now the limitation, there is no limitation. I could mint 1 million NFTs if I wanted to, but I'm only going to mint 12 because
I think there's a limitation.
A narrative.
There's gas fees.
Oh yeah, gas fees, sure.
Yeah. So if you're minting like 10,000 profile pics, I mean, they could be.
That is true. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. But I haven't encountered that. Like, I haven't like I guess like between, let's say, 1 and what would you say, 1,000 is like sort of affordable, you know? Yeah. I think it's much more about like the narrative, and like you're almost writing like a story when you're putting out an NFT, like both in the creation of the NFT, but also then like what will the NFT sort of have benefits and perks, and what kind of like, secondary story. You're like almost creating like your own Marvel universe, if you will, when you create an NFT. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I wanted to turn it over to people pleaser Emily, and sort of switch gears into how you educated yourself in the space. So I think that's for a lot of people when they enter something new, it's like it's hard to figure out where to start. And obviously for you, like your background came through decentralized finance, and I'm curious, how does a topic like decentralized finance serve as a good or bad place for you to enter the crypto space, and how did that sort of parlay into NFTs?
Well, I kind of entered the space almost not like by choice, but because last summer it was the pandemic and I was supposed to go be a digital artist at Apple. But then my offer got rescinded due to the pandemic. So then because I was jobless, I sort of like had no choice but to kind of look for other ways to make money. And one of my friends at the time was like, and I had been passively investing in crypto since 2017. So this is a technology that I have believed in for a while now, but I never thought that my skill set would have anything to do with cryptocurrency, basically. And then my friend said, hey, like something, so basically last summer, known as DeFi summer, there was this movement called like the decentralized finance movement, where a lot of sort of like automated market makers like came into place. Basically, DeFi or decentralized finance is using like cryptocurrency in the blockchain, mostly on Ethereum, sort of like people can like yield farm and do a lot of like models that exist in traditional finance, but using smart contracts and code, it is now automated and running by itself on the blockchain, and that's why it's decentralized, because it kind of runs itself, and then you cut out like the middleman. So that's kind of like the long and short of it. And so my friend was like, look, I'm making like crazy yields doing this, farming this in crypto right now, you should check it out. And then so literally that's how I got into it. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can see, if I can make some money there. And then that's how I discovered crypto Twitter, which is mainly where, people in NFTs or like people who are involved in crypto are sort of like socializing, which is on Twitter. And then so I also noticed that the culture there, the sense of humor and like the meme language and everything like was very much like highly resonated with my own. It was a language that I understood in culture, in terms of culture. But when it came to like the technical terms and stuff, it was definitely, I felt like, yeah, like I landed on Mars or something. Everything that everyone was saying, like I just didn't understand. And it was totally one of those like fake it till you make it situations. Like someone would be saying something to me and I'd be like, oh yeah, totally, like I totally get it, and I totally do not get it, and then I have to privately text my friend after and be like, what does YUSD mean, like all these things. But basically during the DeFi boom, basically because I didn't understand like the terms, so to sort of like educate myself, I would like read through the white papers, not understand what they mean, and then try to sort of like make sense of it. And then while I was doing that, I was using animated art, like a visual medium, for myself to sort of regurgitate that in a way that's more digestible for other people. And then so it was like also to like help myself learn, but then at the same time I could help other people learn. And so that's actually literally why I got into it. And then so I just started making these little like animations that kind of explain concepts in DeFi. And then through that, because people, in DeFi, like also were obviously in NFTs, like they're very interconnected. And then so that's how I discovered NFTs as well. And I just slowly sort of like built up a community of people who are like crypto native. And so, yeah, that's where my like art and community was born, I guess.
Nice. So it's basically an unexpected sort of moment that led to all this, which is really cool with the Apple offer and whatnot. So I just actually wanted to stay in the same lane. I wanted to shift over to James. Like obviously for you in the learning perspective, you kind of went about this primarily on your own. And when you did your first NFT drops, it was primarily through your own channels or like as an individual versus a partnership with someone else. What were the pros and cons of tackling it and trying to immerse yourself so that you are sort of the entry point into understanding for yourself and dissecting the whole thing?
Well, I think the beauty of the whole space is that an artist can be, I think, truly sovereign or independent. I mean, I did have a couple of friends advise me along the way, and we were on the phone like every single day talking about it and figuring out the scene and tracking all the developments. It was a really insane time where a lot of artists and a lot of friends I'd known in the past would come out of the woodwork, and everyone would sort of convene and on Clubhouse. We'd have some private rooms on there, and we would talk about what was going on and how to go about it and different strategies. So I wasn't really alone, but everyone was trying to frantically figure out the space. And so, with my NFT, I suffered from this condition called FOMO. I don't know if you heard of it, but I was, on crypto Twitter and seeing everything that was going on. And I had been in discussions with a platform called Legend, and we had a whole release planned. But, I decided to just drop an NFT beforehand just to test things out. And this was completely unannounced. And I decided one morning to try it and to see what would happen. And after I minted it and released it, I was texting with friends, and we were looking at the activity on Twitter, and they were noticing, this crypto collector, NFT collector is, liked your post, you should respond to him, and all sorts of activity was going on behind the scenes. Everyone's just trying to figure out their own way. I mean, I think a lot of artists and musicians have come up with their own platforms, so they don't need to deal with any middlemen, and that's a very powerful thing. And some people work with teams, especially these days with the popularity of the collectibles or the profile pictures like the Bored Apes and the Weird Whales. There's teams of people that work together to bring those things online and to create like what do you call it? Like not like a timeline, but they have like a plan. A roadmap, yes, a roadmap, exactly for the for the series, and so that is a very powerful thing, and you can create a lot of excitement behind your project that way. For me, as a painter and as someone who's very busy doing other things, NFTs aren't my main focus. It was a new way for me to kind of reach this massive audience that was hungry for something to collect. And I think part of the controversial aspect of it all was how transparent the whole process is. And the art world is traditionally more opaque. At an art fair, you don't know exactly what's going on. You don't know what's sold out or what's sold. You don't know how much. But then, in the NFT space, people can see everything. It's laid bare, and it can be very shocking to some people who are not used to seeing this relationship between a collector and an artist. The whole thing is extremely fascinating, and I think if you're brave enough, yeah, it's great if you can do it on your own. But then, you know, there are also some pitfalls in terms of handling, the fallout and reception and things like that.
Maybe on the flip side to that, you could speak a little bit about your experiences and people that you've partnered with, Jeff, and how they've helped sort of guide you along and the upside, or maybe if there are downsides as well to that process.
Yeah, I mean, the way James did it is crazy. I would never do it that way. He's a reckless individual. Jeopardizing his whole career for NFT. No, I'm just kidding. But I definitely wanted a shepherd or a guide to take me through it. So it didn't take long to figure out that there was this crew called Artifact, RTFKT, Artifact Studios, that was really doing some pretty revolutionary things. So I literally just slid into their DMs and said, I love what you guys are doing. It reminds me of what I was doing when I dropped a sneaker 15 years ago. You know, I feel that same energy. And they wrote back immediately and was like, legend, we have to work together. And so we embarked on a 90-day project. Like, it took 90 days for it to come to fruition. And then it just happened. It was so fast. I was holding on for dear life. They were 3 kids. God bless them. I never met them before. I still only have met one of them. One's in Paris, one's in Mexico, one's in Utah. And it felt like working with hackers, to be honest. Like, I didn't know if I was being conned sometimes, or like, you know, I didn't know like who to believe, but thankfully they were a great crew and they worked out. And I did that on purpose, Eugene. Like, I sort of did that where if it blew up in my face and it like was totally bad, I could have been like, oh, it was Artifact's fault, it wasn't me. You know, Artifact messed it all up. But if it was a success, I could be like, yeah, that was my idea, it was our idea, you know. Like, so I sort of hedged my bets that way. And then I also had people that I can lean on, similar to what Emily was saying. Like, when all these things are coming and flying at you fast and furiously, like, you have somebody that you can ask. Like, I was asking James, like, about MetaMask wallets early on, and like, should I use Coinbase? What should I use? And he was helpful in the beginning as well. And yeah, to James's point, this is really a whole new world, you know, like, and it's very exposed. And for creatives, or really anybody in the industry who likes to sort of like hide their work until it's fully ready and then expose it to the world, this is a very scary thing. And I'll give you a real life example of that. So like, you can own, I could be saying the wrong thing, by the way, so Emily and James don't laugh at me if I use the wrong terminology, but like, I was trying to own my .eth handle, right? I was trying to get that. And so I got Jeff Staple Pigeon .eth. And the moment I formed it, people on Twitter were like, whoa, why don't you have any NFTs in your wallet, I guess it's called, right? Like, so essentially the sneakerhead in me is saying like, that's like, you just built like a sneaker closet and the whole world knows you have no sneakers immediately, right? And then people start dropping art into your closet. So all of a sudden I open my closet and there's like 6-7 different pieces of artwork in there, right? I'm like, well, I didn't even want this. This is so ugly, this artwork, you know? And it's like, now it's like, I'm represented by these artists. And then I asked my friend, can I get rid of these? Like, I just want to get rid of them. They're like, no, don't get rid of them. That's a scam. If you get rid of them, they can now like, it's like a hacker scam. And I was like, really? Now I have to leave these things in my closet, you know? And then, so the handle that I really wanted was jeffstaple.eth. And so I couldn't get that. The second I opened my Jeff Staple Pigeon.eth, the owner of Jeff Staple Pigeon.eth reaches out. But this is the difference between like crypto world and like the real world. The guy reaches out and he's like, Jeff, I'm a huge fan. I love pigeons. I love what you're doing. You want to buy your handle back? And I'm like, if you like me so much, just give it back to me. You know, like, why are you trying to be homies and friends with me? Whereas like in the real world, it'd be much more like dark and, you know, like evil. So it's like, I'm trying to learn all the new culture and like the ways they communicate. It's really fun. It's like it's the Wild West.
Yeah. There's something that James mentioned in his previous answer about sovereignty, and I actually want to kick it over to People Pleaser. One thing you're big into is just like this paradigm shift for underrepresented artists. What sort of opportunity do NFTs and digital art provide for people that traditionally don't have the same platform or voice? And, you know, like as James mentioned, it's like a sense of sovereignty and control over your own outcomes. Like, can you maybe talk a little bit about that and how you envision things playing out in the near future?
For sure. I mean, I mean, I'm sure James could speak more about like, how the traditional art world works, but I mean, just using myself as an example, if it wasn't for like cryptos and NFTs, I always say like, I feel like I like teleported or something. Like, I feel like, previously in a regular world, I would not even be up here today. Like, it'd probably take me 10 years or something of like, networking and connection making to even like get anywhere. And I mean, this morning I just closed my collaboration that I did with like Steve Aoki that we auctioned off at Sotheby's, which is crazy given that I only started doing independent artwork just a year ago. And, that's just not a kind of like trajectory that you can expect in a previous world that relies so much on, middlemen like making the connection for you and, yeah, and I mean, like, also, like I think in the traditional art world, there is obviously a huge like gender disparity as well, where majority of like collectors and highest selling artists have just typically been male. But the beauty of something like crypto is like if you go on crypto Twitter, half the people don't even have names or faces, like they're literally anonymous and just have like a random avatar. And I think that's cool about like the space is that a lot of people don't really care what you look like, who you are, where you come from, who you know. Like you don't need to know people in the space to make it. Like as long as you're doing cool stuff, people are very, very generous and welcoming and not hesitant to sort of like prop you up and just encourage you to do more work. And that's obviously something that happened to myself, and I'm really lucky. And yeah, I think like these are obviously just like examples. And then to bounce off of Jeff's point, like with royalties is completely a game changer, right? Like, if Jeff makes like a shoe and then now that because secondary markets are like a really hot thing, he's forever going to get royalties, not just the royalties, but also like the credit for, on-chain credit for anything that sells, right? And then so with myself as well, like, now it's like sometimes randomly I'm just like getting, like literally funds are just automatically like being transferred into my wallet because of secondary sales that are happening elsewhere that I might not even have like known about. It's just like creating a lot more ways for people to generate an income and like, own your own brand as opposed to like trying to go through anybody else. And building your own community, like you can decide how that happens. Like you don't actually need, and other like examples would be like, in July, I helped crowdfund like a whole documentary with like my NFTs. So they're making a documentary about Ethereum, and then we crowdfunded it using a round of NFTs that I made, and then we raised like over $2 million within 48 hours. So basically, like within 2 days, the entire film project was funded. So they don't need like any sort of outside third-party company to come and be like, we're going to fund your project, because then that means they get decision-making power, and like they're getting a cut in the future. It's like the film project was completely self-funded through the community. And I mean, all of these things are just completely game changers. So yeah.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, the artists are ahead, and the people in the legacy traditional world are behind. So at least for right now, we have all the power. And it's interesting to see like the galleries kind of insert themselves in the middle and figure out how to get in on the action. They haven't really been able to yet, but yeah, I think it's a really important time right now for artists to kind of, take the spear and go forward.
Yeah, there's like this inversion of control, basically.
Yeah. And this is, this is something I was going to ask towards the end, but I think it's probably a good time right now. For you guys both as artists, like what would be a good way for someone that's, in the audience is interested that in getting into this world, and what are what should be their expectations? Like, obviously you guys have been successful with relatively high ticket sales, but like, should they temper their expectations? So it's kind of like a two-part question. Like, how would you approach it? And then how should you mentally look at the outcome?
I do think that, with a lot of talk of, everybody's getting hilariously rich in crypto and NFTs, there's partial truth to it. And also, but like, I do feel like people really need to manage their expectations. A lot of people, have come to me like, They might be people who are like extremely popular, you know, celebrities or whatever, like extremely popular in like a pre-crypto Web3 world, but that conversion rate of like your fan base doesn't translate one-to-one when you start doing NFTs, because, you know, you might have like 1 million fans, but maybe not all of them or most of them don't know about crypto or like know how to use crypto. And so, you know, a lot of people come into the space thinking like, oh, well, I'm a celebrity, I must be able to like sell my NFT for a lot, and then end up being disappointed. Not to mention like, you know, and if you're like coming into the space as a nobody, I think like for myself, it's a combination of like luck, some calculated moves, and being in the right place at the right time. But definitely, you know, my community is one that I had built up myself, but it was like a very crypto native one. And then so that's why, you know, like I was able to sort of like come into the NFT space with a bang, but it was like a calculated thing, not a calculated thing, but it was like I had noticed that NFTs were blowing up, and I was like, well, I have a fan base of people who are like crypto rich basically. So you know, I like timed it so that it would be like a very special project that I did, that I dropped as like my first auctioned NFTs. So you know, I would just like give the advice for people trying to come in. It's like not like, oh, if you just drop an NFT, it's just gonna do well. Like you need to speculate like the community that's out there, what they're interested in, and you know, like whether or not they're like engaged in crypto. Those are all like really important things to consider. And it's not just like, oh, if you come and make NFTs, you're just gonna start making a lot of money. And especially because minting things actually costs money. You know, you have to spend gas. And then so, yeah, it's definitely, you know, a lot of artists are like, oh, it's like, they think it's like free to like start making NFTs or something. It's actually not. So yeah, these are all like things I need to like study up on. Basically, I would just say, just go on Twitter, seriously. Like there's all the information is out there. There's so many podcasts now that people can watch that are very informative. And yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, James?
Well, there's also, you know, Discord channels. There's
Right.
Yeah, there's so many resources out there for people to learn about this space. And you know, I know the gas fees can be prohibitive for a lot of people, but there's platforms like Hikek Nunk or other chains that have very low gas fees, so you can kind of experiment with it and just see how it goes, and figure out how to connect a wallet and do all of that securely. And I would only do it if you have an interest in technology, the future, and your independence as an artist. If you have no interest in that, then it's not for you. So.
Sounds good. This next question I wanted to start off with Jeff's perspective, but over the course of this discussion, there's been a lot of talk about financialization, and I think there's this very strong intersection of financialization of culture that's going on. And in what ways does culture and creativity change for the better or worse when we're starting to really talk about money so close to the actual creation of it? So it's like, you know, back in the day, there might have been the desire to just put something out there, but now it's like, I'm putting something out there because it will sell, right? And will that impact how we move forward in terms of this whole movement and the way we create? I'm not sure that's entirely clear, but I think just to kind of preface it, it's like, it seems anything and everything now has a dollar sign attached to it, where, you know, the interest in a sneaker is defined primarily by what price is it going for on StockX versus the actual like design merit of it, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be sort of one of the things that I said that I was going to say about your previous question. So it still applies, but like, I would not do it for the money. Like, don't jump on the bandwagon of trying to make a quick buck. Because one thing that I learned is that the NFT community is extremely fickle. They sort of look for people that are doing money grabs, and they like go against it. So you kind of have to really have a body of work that is already compelling. You have to prove that you're interested in the culture, and then you have to create something meaningful that is additive to that for it to even have a chance of being successful. And while, yes, you know, even when it comes to like physical shoes that I do, I'm not going to lie and say I don't care about the resale value. I do care. It's an indicator of how well the shoe's being received. But at the same time, I would have released that shoe even if I didn't get a check for it or didn't get any resale dollars for it. Like I have to want to release that shoe because I respect the shoe brand or I want that shoe on my own 2 feet. And so that's how I approach it with NFTs too. Like when we released our NFT with Artifact, I put everything into that I wanted to see out of it. And thankfully, by sheer luck, like people in the community embraced it and they still embrace it. I honestly don't clearly yet know why they embrace it so much, but it's working. And then the other advice that I was sort of wanted to give about this too is like, if you're going to get into this, there's two things. One is I think you have to start with just understanding crypto, which is the currency for NFTs. For those who don't know, like I spent probably 3 months just playing with converting US dollars to like different forms of whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum. Because it's like, imagine you're entering a casino. You have to first understand like what the red chip does, the blue chip does, and the pink chip does before you can even really start gambling, because you have to understand just like the metrics and how it fluctuates every single day, and how one day you think you've hit it big and the next day you're like, WTF happened here? Like, I don't get it. Like, it's a roller coaster. So once I got comfortable with that, then I went into NFT. And then to what I said before about, only hop into the NFT if you think it's right for you. And I also think after, I don't know if you guys have had this hit you, but like after I released my NFT, all these corporations started to hit me up about doing collaborative NFTs, because that's what's happening in the real world. If you're hot in the real world, these huge multinational companies want to collaborate with you. So they're doing that in the NFT world. And everyone that I've talked to, like for instance, Artifact or anyone else, they're like, no, forget the Fortune 100 companies. They're not allowed in this world. Like, I don't care how much money they throw at us. They're not allowed in this world. And if they do try to come in, they're going to fail. We're going to make sure that they fail. So that there's this real like hacker mentality. So I don't think the big brands yet should necessarily put NFT as like a marketing tactic in their annual PowerPoint yet. I think you should let the culture mature a little bit. This would be like the equivalent of when skateboarding was invented in the 80s and like Nike was ready to sponsor a skater in the first week that skateboarding was born. Like, no, you got to let the culture maturate a little bit, and it's still like in that maturation mode right now.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting insight, because in terms of how things have played out, you've seen brands sort of enter into space. I've worked with some brands that also have tried it out, and for primarily a lack of marketing, like and to what I think it was People Pleaser said, just because you're a celebrity doesn't mean that they're going to immediately transfer over and understand what you're selling. But I actually had like more of a creative question for you guys, because as you start to enter the world of digital art and creating that in that realm, how does that open up your mindset, or open up the opportunities for you to create things that don't necessarily need to exist in the same sort of 2D plane of like, a piece of 2D graphic design? Like if you look at the Artifact shoe that Jeff did, it's not a shoe that would be able to exist in real life, at least not right now currently, right? And then, even with animation, all that stuff, does it change fundamentally how you look at the ideas you can put out into the world, because there's now the opportunity to monetize this crazy thing?
I mean, well, I feel like my answer is, 'cause I've always been sort of like digitally native. I've been a digital artist ever since I was in school, right? So, and I also try to live a minimalistic lifestyle. So, I feel like I don't like physical stuff. So, like if I move around a lot, I can't bring like giant art pieces with me. So, like a digital like James Jean NFT would be so much more like utility wise, like for me at least, like as a digitally native person, it would be so much more meaningful to me than having to carry like a really physical piece, so that's like my like perspective on it, but I'm sure like you guys have slightly different ones because you're not like sitting in front of a computer all day like me.
Well, I think it's kind of funny when I see people call themselves an NFT artist. Because for me, I don't see a distinction between an NFT artist and a regular artist. You're just an artist. It just so happens that you're able to sell this work as an NFT. So the idea is, they're the same in either worlds. It's just, I was always making digital work. There's just no way to actually sell it as a original per se. But now there is. So, but the image is exactly the same as it was. It was made in Photoshop. There's no actual physical of it. But yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that. But no, actually, I was just thinking about what you were saying before about the commodification of art and doing art for art's sake. I think the idea of doing art for art's sake is actually a relatively new idea, and paintings, great works of art before hundreds of years ago were only possible because of a wealthy patron who actually controlled the taste and controlled the output of the art based on what they were able to commission. And the idea of doing art for art's sake is actually pretty recent. Yeah, I mean the concept of NFTs and ownership, and what is an original, it raises a lot of interesting questions. And when this whole thing started, I really questioned the idea of ownership. What does it mean, and also currency, and the foundation of everything, which is actually, if you think about it, is just based on faith, your belief in an artist's ability to create, to be valuable in the culture. And the NFT is almost like a symbol of how much you value this artist's contribution to society. And because now we live in a digital age, it doesn't have to be a physical object. It's just a line of code. And I think conceptually it kind of really strips everything down to the essence of what ties us all together, which is our belief in each other's ideas, and how we're able to kind of push ourselves forward as a culture and as a society through ideas. So then money is sort of our way to kind of make it function. So it's really all incredibly I think interesting and yeah, just mind-blowing sometimes.
I'd like to add that I've sort of been designing for not necessarily NFTs, but about 5 years ago, I would say, I started to create clothing in the physical world, real clothing. But then I would intuitively start taking pictures of the clothing and doing test Instagram posts of the clothing to see how real life clothing would look on your iPhone on Instagram. Because I knew that if certain details weren't showing up on IG, it's not even worth putting in, because that's where the platform's being digested, So in essence, that's sort of the same as an NFT art. It's like you're creating something, the format just happens to be different. And the other thing that I was noticing was when I had a retail store, I spent all this time trying to curate and carry the best brands from all over the world and make sure we get this really beautiful curation. And what I noticed kids were doing is they would grab all of these clothes to try on, they get their Visvim in their neighborhood and they're limited edition Nikes, Sakai, and then they would go in the dressing room for 30 minutes. And then what I would notice is they were doing a photo shoot in the dressing room. They would leave, give back all the clothes, post the photos, and get all the props for their look without spending any money. And I was like, wow, these kids are basically creating digital art of themselves without it costing $1. And I'm sitting here holding the bag of inventory, and they're getting all the currency of clout, right? They're getting clout out of it for nothing. And I was like, man, I'm falling behind in this world, So to hear what Emily's saying about why do you even need physical stuff anymore? That, it hurts me because it reminds me of how old I am, but also it is the way that, the generation thinks now. When we were doing the artifact stuff, I remember I was asking the guys hey, when do I see first round samples? Which is a normal question to ask when you're creating something. And they're like, why would you need physical samples? Just put your hand out and I'll just put whatever you want in your hand. And I was so mind blown when he said that. He was like, physical samples are so old, you know? And Emily, going back to your story, James, you remember one of the first times I ever met you when you had that warehouse with Cho, like that airport hangar size warehouse. I remember I was there and you're like, dude, do you want this like triptych? I don't want it anymore. And I remember because I couldn't fit the triptych in my Volkswagen, I couldn't take it. But if you had airdropped me an NFT, I would have definitely taken that.
Yeah. Cool. I think we're running out of time here, so I wanted to see if there were any audience questions. Obviously, I'm not there, so I'll have Michael assist. But if there are any audience members that want to ask a question, please feel free to do so.
This is a bit of a loaded statement or a question, but hello. Such companies like Infinite Objects, they'll take an NFT and actually make it an object you can wear on your watch, a necklace. Is that a new approach that some designers like Jeff Staples or any other kind of designer can actually monetize, making their digital work actually wearable, actually something tangible that is a little bit different, feels the same ballpark as traditional art?
I mean, yeah, I think I see those things as like kind of like a gateway to sort of, you know, it's also like could be like a flex, right? Like, you know, you could own something in the digital world, but you're not gonna like pull out your MetaMask wallet or something and just show everybody on the street. Or, you know, if you're at home, like if you bought like a digital NFT, obviously you could say like, oh, I can also still display it in my house if I don't own the NFT, but it's like kind of like the same thing. I just like this concept of like digital ownership, I think requires a huge paradigm shift for people to really understand. But honestly, I would relate it to like, you know, it's like just when everybody sort of like agrees that you own this thing because we all witnessed this happen on the blockchain, then, you know, now you own it. And then so that it's the whole sort of like kind of like a flex, but yeah, like wearing things like that are digital in the physical, I think is just sort of helping maybe some people understand that like this thing really exists, and then you spend money on it, you want to show it off. Same thing as like putting a CryptoPunk on your profile picture or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, physical objects. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to combine the two, where, you know, you sell something physical and then it's tied to an NFT. So basically, it's like a proof that this is authentic. And then if it's resold, you know, you transfer the object to someone else, and then you also sell the NFT at the same time. So it's all tracked on the ledger, and people get royalties. I mean, that is, I think, the dream of a lot of people right now. It's very complicated because, you know, crypto is meant to be decentralized, and so you have all these centralizing forces trying to figure out like the one blockchain to use, and it's very confusing. But I think you know, that's a very natural way to see how this can move forward. You know, you have either like an original painting or like an edition, and you have that tied to something that's on a blockchain. I mean, that would be ideal for
I don't think there's like, yeah, I like your point was, but I don't think there's any like one blockchain that has to be the blockchain. You can think of them as like, honestly, I would always say like they're like cities. So Ethereum would be like New York City or something, where it's like probably the most expensive one, but everybody is there. So like everyone wants to pay a premium to be in it. And then like Solana would be like Austin, Texas or something, but you know, they can all coexist.
Is Bitcoin like New Jersey?
Bitcoin is Boomerville.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Is it on? Okay. Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for the talk. I think this is a great subject matter. I'm a supporter of crypto, but I would want to ask. I mean, I think there's a lot of artists who have concerns about. There's a lot of artists who have concerns about the environmental impacts of crypto. And I mean, I know that there's a lot of rebuttals. I follow someone named Carter who does a lot of extensive work in terms of the energy expenditure of crypto, such as Bitcoin. But what would you say to artists who have concerns about the environmental impact of crypto to kind of ease their concerns?
I mean, James and I were literally just talking about, James like had unfortunately been, I think there's a lot of, you know, you need to do your own research. Like there's a lot of fake news going on. Literally James is like one of the victims of fake news. Like when he dropped his NFTs, like somebody went and like calculated the energy consumption, but instead of like doing it for his individual piece, they did it for like the entire website or something. And then the numbers were all wrong. And I mean, I was just like telling him like, honestly, at the end of the day, like we all choose, you know, nobody can be like a perfect person. Like everything from like the clothes that I'm wearing are probably have like some kind of carbon footprint. Like if you really care so much about the environment, like meat consumption is like such a huge damage. You know, it's like, why are we just targeting something like the blockchain, which might just be something that people don't understand? And there is a lot of misinformation that's being spread. I'm not saying it's like perfect for the environment, but at the same time, there's so many things in our lives that are also really damaging to the environment. So that would be like my perspective.
Well, I think the scale of NFTs is minuscule compared to a lot of other activity that goes on, like banking or, you know, social media, you know, streaming, movies. And, you know, I went on a deep dive about, you know, the energy use of NFTs because, you know, I was canceled on Twitter because of this fake news, and I talked directly to Memo Atkin, who had created the cryptoart.wtf calculator, which he then took down because I think he realized that the, you know, not only was it used to persecute artists unfairly, but the fundamental data is impossible to quantify, and everyone's data is all sorts from Digiconomist, and if you go on their site, it's all just super rough estimates. There's no way to figure out, you know, how much renewable energy is being used for, you know, this Bitcoin mining facility, you know, where. It's just because electricity is just so distributed, it's impossible to really figure out the actual damage. But you really have to think about it in terms of scale. So if you're making NFTs, it's actually incredibly minuscule. I mean, the numbers, I was working with this guy who did the carbon FYI calculator. Is that right? Carbon FYI. So he was the competing calculator to the crypto art WTF calculator. Maybe competing is the wrong word, but so Brendan from the carbon FYI calculator, he said my NFT was actually the same carbon footprint as producing a T-shirt, whereas the crypto art WTF calculator would say it's like boiling 2 Olympic-sized pools of water. So, you know, I think the controversy is honestly overblown, and a lot of it can all be traced back to this one article written by Everest Pipkin, who wrote this, you know, famous article on Medium. You know, show this to someone who's, you know, what's the title of it? This is what you can show someone when they're gonna, you know, sell an NFT, or why NFTs are bad. And you know, and Everest works in the gaming industry, and gaming is notorious for how much energy consumption there is. And Everest is not a climate scientist, and so far there haven't been any climate scientists that have tried to tackle this issue. And I've reached out to some people to help, and the thing is, it's impossible to figure out. So. But I think if you do the research and you use your brain to kind of conceive of all the activity that's going on, I think it's probably more correct to think that, you know, making your NFT is, you know, much less evil than a lot of other things that we're doing. And as humans, you know, we're born in sin. You know, if you want to not destroy the environment, you might as well erase yourself from the planet. So that's my answer.
Well, thanks a lot for everyone's time, taking time out of their schedule to contribute to this. In short, I want to thank you guys for your time and your effort. Everyone that were able to ask questions as well. I think it's helpful for people to kind of gain an insight through the experiences of others. And I think that all these guys here are pretty accessible. So feel free to find them on social media. I'm going to pass it over to Julia to wrap us up.
You know, personally, I don't know if I'm wiser or more confused, but I think that there are options for Eugene, because, you know, amongst us, I know that the focus was quite on the art and the artist itself, but what I thought was very intriguing when I was chatting with Eugene was that the NFT world kind of expands over to fashion, to music, and amongst us, we also have architects and photographers. So very quickly, Eugene, if you could talk really quickly about that, is that this world is not just about art, but it seems as though it's like permeating to the other space as well.
Yeah, I think that my general interest within the world was in the world of crypto and NFTs and whatnot was really about how do we fundamentally value the things that we create, which obviously art plays a big part of, but also are there different mechanisms where can we take control? And I think the one thing that's interesting is People Pleaser did a project that was able to, and you worked with Fortune, right? And I think that that was an opportunity where you could definitely bring media into the mix, because I think media is definitely in this existential crisis on how to survive. And these are opportunities where you can find ways to generate funding for projects, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a report, a research paper. I think this is really interesting. And then I think going back to, I'm kind of riffing off of everyone's insights, like even the idea of understanding what fashion is at its very core, which is like signaling identity, does it need to exist as a physical piece? Probably not, especially if we start to improve upon our ways to apply like AR in terms of taking, you know, increasingly realistic photos of us wearing a pair of sneakers, courtesy of an NFT AR filter. So I think those are the things that are inherently interesting, because there's sort of the intangible element of how we think about things, and then there's the actual application execution of it. So I think that, you know, to kind of bring it all back together, is that people feel like they don't know where to start, but I think that once you start in a place that is as familiar as possible to you, whether you're an artist, whether you're a designer, I think it quickly spirals out in terms of how you can apply it to different creative industries.
And I think that that's a great way to wrap up this session. I really do want to thank Eugene in Hong Kong and Jeff in New York. I'm really hoping that we could do this in person, everyone at one place, but this is really fantastic that we were able to do that. Thank you. Thank you.